The medicine of East Asia is based on a science that does not hold itself separate from the phenomena that it seeks to understand. Our medicine did not grow out of petri dish experimentation or double-blind studies. It arose from observing nature and our part in it. East Asian medicine evolves not from the examination of dead structures, but rather from living systems with their complex, mutually entangled interactions. Welcome to Qiological. I'm Michael Max, the host of this podcast that goes in depth on issues pertinent to practitioners and students of East Asian medicine. Dialogue and discussion have always been elemental to Chinese and other East Asian medicines. Listen into these conversations with experienced practitioners that go deep into how this ancient medicine is alive and unfolding in the modern clinic. Before we get into the show today, I've got a question for you. When you think about, and I'm using air quotes here, business, what is it that comes to mind for you? I suspect you might have just had a visceral reaction just from hearing the word. Anyway, chew on this, and later in the show, I've got a little Chinese lesson that might help you to expand your definition of business. These conversations come to you through the generous support of our sponsors and members. All the sponsors here provide helpful products or services that you'll find beneficial in your clinical work. Want to get better at treating concussions and other neurological conditions? Clayton Shoe has some innovative methods. Blue Poppy, your new one-stop shop, has speedy shipping options on everything that you need for your clinic. Later in the show, Jane offers you helpful suggestions on how to raise your rates, and Golden Flower Chinese Herbs shares a journey of healing that I think you'll recognize. Do be sure to visit the sponsors page on the Qiological website to take advantage of all the special offers our terrific sponsors have for listeners of the podcast. Picture this. Your clinic is buzzing with patients, and then you realize that you're down to your last box of needles. No need for panic, because Blue Poppy, your one-stop shop for all your acupuncture needs, they ship orders received before 3 p.m. on the same day. With a quick visit to Blue Poppy's website, you can order premium needles, herbal formulas, and that special Dr. Bob's oil that your patients love. Blue Poppy understands practitioners can't keep patients waiting. That's why they strive to get you what you need when you need it. From high-quality Chinese herbs and formulations to acupuncture supplies and clinical essentials, Blue Poppy has served practitioners for nearly 40 years with products that meet the highest of standards. Discover everything Blue Poppy has to offer by visiting www.bluepoppy.com, and don't forget to subscribe to their mailing list for exclusive offers and more. Ever found yourself listening to a Qiological conversation and thinking, wow, I needed to hear that? Yeah, me too. And I never know when I'm going to hear a guest say something that stops my world and reboots it with a larger perspective. If these conversations have ever helped you to feel more grounded, more inspired, or just less alone in this strange and wonderful work we do, consider becoming a member or supporting the podcast with a bit of tithing to the donation jar. It helps keep the lights on here at the Qiological Sound and Motion Lab so that we can bring you these conversations every Tuesday morning. You'll find all the details at qiological.com. Thanks for listening and for being a part of this.
Hey there, I'm Cameron Jafari, an acupuncturist from Los Angeles. So I started learning nanopuncture from Dr. Clayton Shoe because I was facing these complex neurological conditions like stroke and MS in my clinic, and I just felt like I lacked a solid process to treat them. Brain-related issues always felt like a whole different animal, and I was looking for a clinical system that worked and could guide me through them. So after attending my first nanopuncture seminar, I was able to apply the process pretty quickly and with pretty amazing results. I remember the first stroke patient I saw afterwards was a guy who had a stroke 2 years back, and he couldn't talk at all. And after a few treatments, he started saying a few words. And a few treatments after that, he could actually have conversations. It was pretty incredible. So this is why I feel like nanopuncture is the future of acupuncture neurology. And you can be a part of that. Their next seminar is on treating concussions and is being co-taught by both Dr. Shu and Dr. Ayla Wolf in New York City on April 26th and 27th. To learn more, visit nanopunctureseminars.com.
everybody. Welcome back to Qiological. I am really thrilled today to be bringing you a show live on tape from Nanjing, China. I am here today with Dr. Huang and some of his doctoral students at the International Fang Institute of Nanjing University of Chinese Medicine. And we're going to have a little discussion about Dr. Huang's methods and get some of his history and bring you some of his latest thinking on using the classic formulas, the Jing Fang, in Chinese medicine. I'm joined today, first of all, by Dan Eng, who is helping me with translation today. Dan, welcome. Good to have you here.
Thanks.
And there's also Aran Evan and Mark Gearing. Those of you that are frequent listeners to Qiological will recognize those names because these two characters have been on the show before. So here we are with Dr. Huang. This show is primarily going to be done in English, although, of course, we're going to have to do some translation back and forth. So please bear with us through some of the Chinese. I'm going to edit it as best as I can to make it as Englishy as possible. And please enjoy the show with Dr. Huang. Huang 教授真的很高兴回来看你。
对呀，我也老在想，我说老麦怎么不见人影，这么多年了。
因为在美国我太忙给人看病，对不起。
这最重要的，做中医看病是最重要的。
是的，是的 ，Yeah。你在读硕士的时候，你的论文是不是跟蒙克派有关系？是不是？是的。I know that you did your master's thesis on the Menghe group, and I'm wondering what the influence of the thesis and the influence of your study of the Menghe doctors has been on your thinking and on your practice.
我的硕士论文是孟和医派的形成与发展。
His master's thesis was on the Menghe current, the establishment and the development of the Menghe current, and it gave him a very deep impression. And one of the main things was that these Menghe doctors were not just people who wrote books; they were very clinically oriented. So it really, one of the main impressions that it gave him was that it taught him that researching Chinese medicine is not just about theoretical and academic things, but it really has to, clinic is what comes first.
他们是18世纪、19世纪活跃在江苏苏南这一带农村，而且农村的一批。
So they were in the southern part of Jiangsu province. They were these Menghe doctors. They knew how to do, they were generalists, so they knew how to do internal medicine. 外科 I would roughly translate as surgery and dermatology. They knew how to do, the throat diseases and all kinds of different things. They knew how to do acupuncture too. So they were really generalists. So they would see a lot of patients in a day, and they had to be really practical because efficacy was their bread and butter. So only if you can really, see patients effectively, treat patients effectively, can you really be a good Chinese medicine doctor?
这就是对我影响最大的一个观念。
So that is the main thing that the Menghe doctors influenced him with, is this idea that clinic is number one. And so Dr. Huang says he is primarily a clinician.
So correct me if I'm wrong in this, but it sounds like what you're saying is that our clinic and our patients are really our greatest teachers. No.
对，这个在临床上，病人就是我们的老师，我们的很多的经验都是病人告诉我们的。
That's right. Our patients are very important teachers, and a lot of our experience is learned from our patients.
My experience has been in the beginning with studying Chinese medicine that there's some things that we learn, and it helps us to get started. It gives us a place to begin, but very often we learn by the things that we do wrong. Sometimes in English we like to say things like getting it wrong is part of getting it right. And so, in the process of becoming a good practitioner, we have to become comfortable with being wrong about what we do, and then we have to learn from our mistakes and learn to improve them. My question is, how can we, in the midst of a moment of being wrong and maybe feeling very anxious about it, still be able to keep our wits about us so that we can learn the lessons that we need to learn from our patients?
其实不仅是你啊，我们也有这个体会。初上临床，经常会有遇到很复杂的病，很棘手的病。
So all of us run into that issue sometimes. We always, whether it's a complex disease that we're treating, or the patient comes back in the second visit, and it turns out that what we did, it didn't work, or there was a bad result, then we can feel nervous. But what we have to do is we have to keep trying and keep trying to learn from that. Each patient, Dr. Huang believes, is a new topic in our learning. So every single patient that comes in the door is completely new for us. So we need to research, and we need to keep the spirit of always researching and learning from these experiences. He's suggesting two methods that we could use to kind of try to learn more about situations like this that are difficult, clinical situations that are difficult. One of them is we can read cases, reading case studies from previous doctors, famous doctors. And the more we read, we might find some that have connections to these cases that we're seeing ourselves in clinic. And that can be very useful and give us some kind of new ideas what to do. The second suggestion that he has is you can talk to colleagues and teachers, especially colleagues and teachers that are experienced, and they can offer you ideas as well, and maybe you haven't thought of them.
所以议案或者案例或者 case， 这是我们学习中医的一个非常重要的入口。
So he believes that studying case studies is very important in studying Chinese medicine. Dr. Huang himself, in the past, he's copied numerous case studies. He would copy them down from famous doctors, from his teachers. He even copied his own case studies. And he thinks that everyone in Chinese medicine should be studying case studies. It's a traditional method of studying Chinese medicine. It's a very important one.
所以说来说去脱离不了临床，脱离不了诊室，因为案例都是在临床上出现。
So this comes back to the idea that you can't get away from the fact that the medicine is primarily clinical in nature. So you can't leave the clinic. Cases are clinical, by definition.
I just had something to say on that topic of focusing on clinic. My impression, with studying with Dr. Huang, there's many different ways to study Jing Fang, but when we're studying Feng Zhen, the formula pattern, and Yao Zheng, the herb pattern, the diagnosis is already the treatment. So once we've established a clear formula pattern, that's already the treatment. We already know which direction we're going to go in that sense. And it's very, versus there's many different ways, as I said, like many different theories out there. So it's sort of, for me, like doing that cuts through a lot of the theory to make it very easily applicable.
是的，这个就通过很多的案例，然后呢，抽出他们的一个共性的共性的东西，基本的东西，慢慢就形成了方阵。伤寒论就是一本医案。
So Fang Zheng, or formula presentation, is it comes from a bunch of cases, basically. So there's clinical cases, and if you study enough of them, then you find common characteristics among those cases, and that can be put together into a formula presentation. That's really what a formula presentation is. It comes from these cases, and he believes that the Shanghan Lun is actually, you could look at it as a case study book. So even though the case studies in there, they're kind of written in all different kinds of ways, but it's really, basically a bunch of clinical experiences in a book.
Dr. Huang, I was wondering if you've been working on any new formula families or formula categories. 黄老师，我想知道，如果最近你有那个新的类方呢？
对，中医十大类方当时是柴胡、桂枝、麻黄、黄芪、石膏、附子、干姜、半夏，还有一个什么地黄类。
So when he wrote the 10 key formula families, there were 10 formula families that he mentioned. It was Chaihu, Guizhi, Ma Huang, Huang Qi, Shigao, Fuzi, Ganjiang, Banxia, Da Huang, and Huang Lian. And since then, that was around 1995, and it's been more than 20 years already. So there are, of course, a bunch of new ones that he's kind of thought of or developed. And he gave some examples. So there's Gancao formula family, could include formulas like Gancao Xiexin Tang, Zhi Gancao Tang, Ganmai Dao Zao Tang. Gegan formula family could include formulas like Gegan Tang, Gegan Qinlian Tang, Guizhi Jia Gegan Tang. And Dangui formula family could have Dangui Xiaoyao San, Dangui San, Dangui Sini Tang, etc. He also mentioned a Dihuang formula family. Shen Qi Wan, Fang Ji Di Huang Tang, Xi Jiao Di Huang Tang, etc. And there's a lot more, he said.
还有很多，包括栀子类方也有，栀
栀子 formula family.
芍药
formula family.
对，正在发展。
So back in the day when he was just kind of developing his thoughts about Chinese medicine, his thoughts were not as refined as they are now, because it's been a long time. They were kind of coarse and kind of unrefined a little bit, and now they're kind of more refined. But his basic model of thinking about Chinese medicine is still relevant, and that is
基本的思路就是方、病、人，我们这个三角这个思维模式。
So his basic way of thinking about Chinese medicine is still relevant, and that can be kind of summed up in a triangle of formula, disease, and the person, the three aspects of looking at things.
十大类方这个印刷的量是非常大，重印的量非常大。那么
So the 10 Key Formula Families book from a long time ago, it has sold quite a lot of copies by now. It's been reprinted a bunch of times, and originally he wanted to revise it. But then he decided he's just going to keep it the same. He's going to keep it the same, and his new ideas will go into new books. So they have a bunch of new books now, and one of the ones that he mentioned that I guess they're working on is called Jing Fang Formula Presentation Textbook, and it goes a lot deeper and into formula presentations, and it's a lot more refined in what it covers.
对，因为我还在进步，我每天还在研究，还在进步。
Because he's still getting better and better. Every day he's always researching and learning and getting better himself. So.
This episode is brought to you by Jing, the clinic management software that I use to keep my practice running smoothly. So, let's talk about something that can be a little bit uncomfortable: raising your fees. I know, this is something that might feel awkward, but it doesn't have to. With a bit of planning and care, you can handle it in a way that feels right for you and your patients. One tip: give yourself at least 2 months to prepare. This gives you time to get comfortable with the change and let your patients know what's happening. You can share the news through emails, booking reminders, or even just a friendly little sign in your clinic, and avoid over-apologizing. Instead, keep it straightforward and matter-of-fact. Keeping things consistent across the ways that you communicate can really help avoid confusion. Fee increases aren't always easy, but you're not on your own here. For more tips and ideas on how to communicate these changes with confidence, check out frontdesk.chain.app and look for the article, How to Tell Your Clients You're Raising Your Fees. Oh, and one last thing, if you're ready to give Jane a try, use the code CHIOLOGICAL for a 1-month grace period on your new Jane account. Dr. Huang, some of us that have studied with you are familiar with this triangle of person, illness, and formula. For those who might be new to your work or listening to this podcast for the first time and hearing about your methods, could you explain a little bit about this triangle?
我的临床，我看病啊，只是盯住3个点，方、病、人，
When he's at clinic, he looks at things from 3 points. It's the formula, the disease, and the person. And these are things that they're not abstract. They're real things that have a basis in reality. And they're also relatively objective, and they're relatively distinct from each other. So we can talk about them and think about them in clear ways. The first thing is formulas. So what does formula mean? It basically mostly refers to classical formulas like guizhitang. And the classical formula is kind of in their original form. So the ingredients, for example, of guizhitang, if you take one out, then it's a different formula. If you modify the dosages, then it's a different formula. He gave a couple examples. The one that I remember is xiaojianzhongtang. If you increase the dose of xiaoyao in the formula, then it's not guizhitang anymore, it's xiaojianzhongtang. When he talks about formulas, he's talking about the original formulas, not something that's been modified in some way. So it's a very clear idea of what a formula is.
病呢，病是我们大家所熟悉的一个诊断的单元啊，是诊断的一个基本的单位。
So then we come to the second point, which is disease. So a disease is an important concept with regard to diagnosis. Diseases can mean ancient diseases, so diseases as defined in ancient times. So that might include like deficiency taxation or blood impediment, water amassment, blood amassment, these kinds of traditional terms. But from a modern clinical perspective, what we see more of usually is modern disease categories. So like diabetes, hypertension, heart attack, heart failure, Hashimoto's, those are the ones he mentioned. So what he's interested in is what formulas can treat this disease or what diseases can be treated by a certain formula. He's interested in the relationship between formula and disease.
很多人的临床思维大约到这里就终止了，很多人就到这里好像停止了，就是研究方治疗什么病。但是我们还有一个点。
So a lot of people just stop there when it comes to diagnosing. They want to know, what formulas can treat a specific disease, and then that's it. But we want to go a step further, and that brings us to the third point, which is the person. So what this means is, what kind of person can this formula treat? Or what kind of formulas can treat this type of person? So this is very important. So Dr. Huang has come up with the idea of the formula person, which means, it basically means, what kind of person can a specific formula treat.
这个人是我们医生用眼睛看得到的。
So as far as determining what kind of person we're looking at, he's referring to things that we can actually see with our eyes and actually feel with our hands, so objective things. Is this person fat or thin? Is the person tall or short? Is the person dark complexioned or light complexioned? Are their muscles developed or are they atrophied? Is the spirit, excited or kind of subdued? Is the face sallow and withered kind of, or is it bright red? And when we also have to feel the abdomen. Is the belly, is it big? Is it thin and flat? Is the pulse floating or sinking? We also pay attention to the person's past disease history and also their family history of diseases. And we want to get a sense of what symptoms do they get easily? Like if they're exposed to cold or wind, what happens to them? What foods do they like? What foods do they react to? What's their sleep like? What are their bowels like? And through the 4 pillars of diagnosis, the visual observation, listening and smelling, questioning and palpating, we take all that information together and then we kind of paint a picture of a person.
方病人，它是一个三角。
In this triangle of formula, disease, and person, we've mostly described two relationships, the relationship between formula and disease and the relationship between formula and person. The relationship between formula and disease, it mainly tells us, is this going to be an effective treatment, and is it going to be effective very quickly? The relationship between the formula and the person mainly tells us, is this going to be safe? And also, is it going to be very precise? So those two relationships, the relationship between the formula and the disease and the relationship between the formula and the person, are two very important parts of Dr. Huang's thinking.
We're going to take a little break for a moment. I hope you've been enjoying this podcast conversation and already gleaned something useful from it. So, back for a moment to this thing about business and how you define it. You know, how you define something profoundly colors how you view it. In Chinese, the word for business is made up of two characters, sheng, yi. Sheng means to create, like the sheng cycle of the five elements. Yi means meaning. It's made up of the characters for sound and heart. It's the same yi as the spirit of the spleen, and it's also often translated as significance. Sheng yi means business, but you can also read it as making meaning or creating something of significance. So the next time you have your tail in a knot about business issues, consider that your task is to create deeper meaning in your work or generate something of significance.
So in that triangle, there's still one relationship that we haven't talked about yet, and that's what's the relationship between the disease and the person. So that means what kind of person could easily get this disease, or what kind of diseases could this person easily get? So that's an important subject of research as well. Dr. Huang is researching it. He's still learning more about it. He's researched more the first two relationships between the ones that we just talked about, between the formula and the disease and the formula and the person. But this third relationship between the disease and the person is also very important. We need to learn more about it.
那可能你们也已经注意到了，方病人这三个概念都是非常的实在的。
So as you may have noticed, these three things, the formula, the disease, and the person, they're all real things with basis in actual reality. We can see them, we can feel them, they're objective. So his triangle of the formula, the disease, and the person, it emphasizes the objectivity of the information that we're talking about. So for example, the formula, we're not talking about methods in Chinese medicine, for example, like strengthening the spleen or tonifying qi or tonifying the kidneys. We're not talking about methods like that, which are kind of, different people might have different interpretations of what that actually means when it comes to clinic. The formula in this triangle, it actually means something that you can see. It's a bowl of medicine in front of us, or it's a bottle of medicine, something like that. So it's something, actually has a basis in reality. The disease also, it has to be something that is not too vague. So for example, like AIDS or diabetes or something like that, there's internationally recognized standards of diagnosis for these things. So it's relatively, it's recognized widely. And if you say that if you say the name of some disease in Japan or in the US or somewhere else, then it doesn't matter where you are in the world, then people know what you're talking about. It's not something like kidney deficiency, where every person might have a slightly different idea about what that actually means. So some people, when you say kidney deficiency, they might think of hair loss and low back pain, or somebody else might think of poor sexual function. So it means kind of different things to different people. And then for people also, the third part of the triangle, the person, like he already mentioned, it's characteristics of the person that are objective and easily recognizable, like is the person fat or thin, dark or light, or etc. Objective things.
那么我这里还要说明一下，有人说，那么经方中间非常强调的一个原则，治疗的原则就叫方正相应。
So in the study of classical formulas, there's an important concept that's called the correspondence between the formula and the presentation. And the formula presentation, when you take those two words, formula and presentation, some people ask Dr. Huang, well, you've talked about formulas, why don't you talk about the presentation? Because he hasn't mentioned that as a concept yet. Well, he just explained that if we take this triangle and if formulas is at the top of the triangle and disease and person are the two lower corners of the triangle, if we take those two lower corners and we squish them together into one, that means taking disease and person and kind of squish them together into one concept. Together, those things make up the presentation. Therefore, his philosophy also fits with this concept, this traditional concept of formula presentation correspondence. This presentation is objective. It means what proof do you have, in clinic? What kind of person is it? What kind of disease is it? So, for example, with Guizhitang, the Guizhitang person, and the list of Guizhitang diseases. It's not just one disease that Guizhitang can treat; it's a bunch of them. So he has a concept called, I'm not sure exactly how to translate this, but it's like a map or like a chart of diseases that belong to any particular formula. It's like a chart or a map or something that tells you, once you look at it, you can see what kinds of diseases in general can this formula treat.
Imagine this. A patient walks into your clinic. They're carrying more than the pain in their body. There's a story there. A history woven with the stress of long days, the ache of things unsaid, and the quiet longing for something to shift. You listen, not just with your ears, but with your hands, your intuition, your heart. It's not just about needles or a formula. It's about connection, understanding the threads that tie us together, mind, body, and spirit. That is where golden flower Chinese herbs comes in. Rooted in tradition and crafted with care, their formulas are more than herbs. They're a bridge between ancient wisdom and modern practice. Every bottle, a quiet partner in your work, helping you to meet your patients where they are. Because healing isn't just about treating symptoms. It's about creating trust, cultivating belonging, and helping someone feel truly seen. Golden Flower Chinese Herbs, your partner in practice and connection, where tradition meets care. 在西方，好多人说人的情绪跟他们得了什么病，或是不得了什么病，或是 Just a few moments ago, you were talking about that you're still researching. You're still doing some research and some exploration on the relationship between person and disease. And one of the things that we hear a lot about in the West, I'm not sure if this is true in China, so I'd like to ask you, but one of the things we talk about a lot in the West is that the emotions often play a very big role in the ways that people get sick or the kinds of illnesses people get sometimes.
很有关系啊，很有关系。这个人是一个活人，人是有他的心理，有他的情绪。
So yes, absolutely, they're related. A person is a living thing. A person has moods, and a person, has their own personal psychology. So that's a main point of ours in clinic is looking at that relationship between the mood and what's going on with the person as far as their health. So he gave an example of the formula Da Chai Hu Tang. The Da Chai Hu Tang person is typically, they have a bad temper. They're easily angered. They're very tense. Their abdomen is tense, and they might be tense psychologically too. They might easily get kind of wound up about things. So, and then when they take Da Chai Hu Tang, the formula, they often feel more relaxed.
还有对有些病人老是怀疑自己生什么病啊，老是感觉到喉咙里有东西啊，感觉到这个皮肤老是那个地方麻麻的疼痛。
He gave another example of the formula Panchahopatang. So this person tends to be kind of a hypochondriac. They always are thinking, do I have this disease or do I have that disease? They might complain of something in their throat, or they might complain of some feeling on their skin, like their skin might be itchy or numb or something, or they might have kind of some gas in their abdomen or something. and they have all these different complaints, but when you do tests on them, nothing comes back positive. Like they're on paper, they're fine. A lot of times with this person, it's 板桥后汤。
并不是说某一种药就治疗某一种情绪，我们还是要看人的，不同的人。
So this is not to say that there's necessarily like a one-to-one relationship between certain types of moods and certain formulas. It's more complex than that. You have to look at the person. So he gave an example of anxiety. So anxiety being one category of psychological issues. If it's a Chaihu person, or if it's a Bancha person, or it's a Guizhi person, or a Da Huang person, they might all take different formulas for their anxiety, even though the anxiety itself might be similar. So, for example, a Chaihu person might take Chaihu Guizhi Ganjiang Tang for anxiety. A Bancha person might take Bancha Hopa Tang or Wendan Tang. A Guizhi person might take Guizhi Jia Longgu Muli Tang. And a Da Huang person, you might give them San Huang Xiexin Tang.
So Michael and I were discussing this question recently, and it's basically there's two parts. Firstly, it's been many years since you've written the Shida Lei Fang, the 10 key formula families. What are some of the things that you believe about Chinese medicine now that you did not believe 10 years ago? And also, how has your view of using formulas and treating disease changed over these last 20 years?
大的原则是没有，大的方向没有变，对中医学的总体论是没有大的变化。
Well, first of all, he answered the question as saying that as far as the big things go, the big ideas that he has about Chinese medicine, the main directions of his thought, there haven't been that many big changes. And he also mentioned that Chinese medicine is also like a life experience. It's like a lifestyle culture for Chinese people. For example, when they get headaches, they might take certain formulas like Ma Huang Fu Zi Xi Xin Tang or Ge Gen Tang. It's an experience of the Chinese people, that people know about. There's also the habits the Chinese people have of taking tonic medicines, like tonic herbal medicines, like they have these things called gaozi fang, which are like tonic jelly type things. And drinking hot water, not drinking cold water is also like a Chinese cultural thing that has to do, it's based on Chinese people's experience and has a cultural element. He also mentioned that there's differences in this. Like, for example, Mongolian people might think that drinking milk tea is healthy for you. And then Southerners might think that drinking cool tea is healthy for you. It's like a lifestyle culture.
但是我知道你们问的问题是什么啊，但是我要强调的就是。
So the reason he brought that up is he has two fervent hopes for Chinese medicine, and as time goes on, he's more and more passionate about these two things. The first one is he wants TCM to become something not just for Chinese people in Chinese culture, but he wants it to go worldwide. So he wants it to be relevant to people all over the world. He wants it to be kind of more widespread. So he wants his classes and his books to be translated into as many languages as possible. He wants everyone to be able to understand.
这是第一个愿望。第二个愿望，第二个我非常强烈，越来越强烈的就是经方这个中医学要规范。
His second hope, which is he's equally passionate about and more passionate as every day goes by, is that he wants Chinese medicine to be systematic or standardized. Standardized. Otherwise, it can't really go worldwide like he's hoping. And along with that hope of DCM becoming standardized that goes along with classical prescriptions that are standardized. So Jing Fang.
所以经方的这个经方的经它就是标准的意思。
So the word Jing Fang, classical formulas or classical prescriptions, the first word of that, Jing, it means standard, or, one of the ways of looking at it, it means standard or standardized. It doesn't just mean the classics in terms of like being specific books, but it means standardized because these formulas are standardized. They're well known. So he now prefers to use the word Jingfang in Chinese, Jingfang, instead of saying in English classical formulas, because then we can really get the meaning. And that's a way of standardizing the term. Standardize it in Chinese as Jingfang and not call it all different things. So in summary, his two hopes for the medicine is that it goes worldwide and that it becomes standardized.
Just to clarify that as a follow-up, it's like observing Dr. Huang over 10 years or so, it seems every year he gets better and better, and he's always learning from his experience, as he mentioned before. But I also find that his diagnosis and his treatment gets more and more refined as well. So, for example, where previously he might have used a bigger formula, like Jing he might now use Huang so it's a much smaller formula. So it's like his formula is becoming smaller and smaller and more precise.
以前我们所认识到的精简连翘汤证，这个中间其实有些药是不需要用的，确实只要用。
That's partially true. His view of it is that, with the Huang Qintang, is that before, many years ago, before he had fully researched Huang Qintang, his view of Huang Qintang was not as broad as it is now. And more recently, he's kind of learned more things about that formula presentation. And he realized that for some patients, all of those herbs in Jingjie Lian Qiao Tang, the bigger formula, some of them weren't necessary in some cases. So yeah, some of them became Huang Qintang patients. He believes that, he's going in a direction of using more original formulas, unmodified formulas, and smaller formulas, and getting closer and closer to the way that Zhang Zhongjing would have used herbs in the past. He also started out, just like most people, using kind of miscellaneous formulas or late formulas from later doctors, and using theories like starting with theory before prescribing medicines. So starting to think about things using theory first, and then going to the methods. It's a traditional way of thinking in that the way that they teach TCM these days. So he started out that way, and then he moved gradually more and more towards the direction of using original unmodified formulas, standardized formulas.
黄教授，我很谢谢你今天抽时间跟我们一起谈经方。我还有另外一个问题想问你。我觉得好多人说健康，他们要健康，可是好多人说要健康，可是健康到底是什么？我想听你的想法。Huang Jiashou, thank you so much for taking some time today to talk with us. I've got just one more question before we close down here today. I'd like to know your ideas, your thoughts on what health is. What does it mean to be healthy?
健康就是没有病，没有疾病。那么这个问题又来了，什么是疾病？
So health means you don't have disease. So that brings us to the question, what is disease? Disease, in his view, is suffering. If you can eat well, you can sleep, you can work, you can laugh, you have good social relationships, you can achieve your goals, that's health. Health is not, he often likes to say, life is a feeling. It's not a number. So health, his kind of summary of all this is health means you're comfortable. You can eat comfortably, you can sleep comfortably, etc. So Jingfang is to make people comfortable. That's the goal of what we do.
黄教授，谢谢你今天来 Theological 跟我们谈。Dr. Huang, thank you so much for being here today.
不谢，也希望大家学好经方，用好经方。经方虽然是中国人发明的，但是应该它是属于全人类的文明。
You're welcome, and he hopes that everyone can learn Jingfang well, use Jingfang well, and he wants everyone to know that Jingfang is not something that belongs only to the Chinese people. It belongs to the whole world.
Well, here we are at the end of this episode. If you've listened up to this point, you're either a rabid fan of Theological or the forward button on your podcast player stopped working. If you are indeed a fan of the podcast, You can help us to bring new episodes to our community of practitioners by supporting us with a membership or a one-time contribution. Details, of course, are on the website. That's it for today, friends. Join us again next Tuesday for another thoughtful episode of Qiological.